The next group of systems that we'll discuss is the systems of nutrient absorption. Okay, Central systems of nutrient absorption are involved in bringing in nutrients that your cells need to carry out the functions that they need to do. Your digestive system is one of the main systems of nutrient absorption. It's the one we think of first when we think about nutrients. And it's involved with the ingestion and digestion of food and absorbing the nutrients and getting rid of waste from that process. Now, digestion often occurs in specialized compartments in animals that are more advanced than a sponge have special compartments for the digestion to occur in. The cnidaria and the flatworms have a gastrovascular cavity that is one cavity with one opening where the food is digested and the nutrients are absorbed, and then the waste is pushed back out the one opening. Other animals beyond that point, from the roundworms on to the rest of the animals, invertebrates and vertebrate animals, have an alimentary canal. This is a digestive tract or a tube with two openings. Some animals, like roundworms, have very simple digestive tract. Others are much more complex. Pharynx, esophagus, crop, gizzard, and stomach are specialized compartments in some animals that take care of various needs for those particular animals. The pharynx, of course, is the throat region. The esophagus is the tube between the throat and the stomach. And the crop and the gizzard are organs that some animals have to both temporarily store food and then to grind up food that they can't chew. The gizzard is present largely in animals that don't have teeth, and so it's just an additional way to grind up parts of their food that can be hard before it enters the stomach for the main chemical digestion. Digestion includes both chemical and mechanical methods. Mechanical, of course, is breaking up the food into smaller parts. That's why you should chew your food well, because that increases the surface area for the action of the enzymes and other chemicals that are involved in the digestive process. The chemical digestion occurs by the process of hydrolysis, adding a water molecule to break molecules down into smaller pieces. This uses various enzymes to break down different kinds of molecules like proteins and carbohydrates, and also acids that help break up some of the more complex molecules. The food moves through the system by means of muscular contractions called peristalsis. This moves the swallowed food down the esophagus sequentially into the stomach and then passes along through the intestines and out of the body. The same kind of muscular contractions that are sequential throughout the alimentary canal. The length of an alimentary canal depends on the diet of the animal that has it. Herbivores generally have longer alimentary canals than carnivores do because plant material is a lot harder to digest. Remember that plants have cell walls made of cellulose, and cellulose is very tough for most animals to digest. Most animals are not capable of breaking down cellulose like they can starch because cellulose has different kinds of bonds, and most animals do not have the enzymes that are necessary to break that down. The animals that do a lot of digestion of plant material, like cattle and goats and sheep and termites even, have symbiotic bacteria that live in their digestive system to help them to produce the enzymes to break down the food. Here we compare the length of the digestive system of a carnivore and that of a herbivore. This carnivore is a wolf, I believe, and you can see that it has a stomach and a very long small intestine, because the stomach and small intestine are involved in the breaking down of the protein food and the reabsorbing of the nutrients. And then a short cecum, which is a specialized compartment for certain bacterial processing of the food. And then the colon in carnivores is very short. That's the large intestine where water gets reabsorbed and the fecal material gets compacted. In a herbivore, like a koala bear, then there's a fairly long small intestine, but there's also a very long compartment called a cecum. The cecum is involved in a process using bacterial action to help break down the plant material, and then all of that goes back into the colon, where after it's absorbed, it goes back into the colon, where the waste material is compacted and then eliminated from the body. Absorption of the nutrients, of course, occurs in the intestine, in the small intestine, mostly in the small intestine. There are thin walls in the intestinal wall, and there are lots of blood vessels nearby. And then some of the nutrients, well, the nutrients go then from the intestine to the liver, where some of the nutrients are processed. Excess glucose is removed and stored as glycogen, like we talked about before. Some essential proteins that the enzyme systems to produce are only found in the liver are done there. Also, various toxins can be modified into less harmful substances in the liver. And liver also produces a substance called bile that helps break down fats in digestion. Remember, fats don't mix well with water. And so you have to break the fats down into smaller pieces or smaller globules in order to produce more surface area for the enzymes to act. And so bile is a substance kind of like soap does or detergent does when you're washing greasy pans. It helps break the fat down into smaller pieces so that the enzymes can be more effective in helping break it down. Here's what the small intestine looks like if you dissect it out. Okay, there's the outer layer there with lots of blood vessels attached to it. There are two muscle layers. One's longitudinal; it goes the length of the intestine, and the other set of muscles is circular muscles that surround it. And basically, those two actions together, the lengthwise and the crosswise contractions, help move the food through the system. Inside the lumen, or the opening of the small intestine, you can see that the interior surface is folded back and forth several times. That produces a greater surface area for the absorption of food. If we take one of those little folds and look at it up more closely, we see that each little fold is composed of thousands and thousands of tiny little finger-like projections called villi. Inside each villus, you have a lymphatic vessel and capillaries that are involved in absorbing the nutrients from the digested food. The blood absorbs the water-soluble things like proteins and carbohydrates, and the lymphatic vessel absorbs the lipid-soluble things like the fat molecules. If you look even closer at the cells that form the outer part of the villus, you'll see that those cells on the outside, the surfaces of them have even microvilli, increasing the surface area even more. So the more and more surface area you can have in that small intestine, that increases the speed with which and the efficiency with which your nutrients can be absorbed, because the more surface area means you can absorb more food more quickly. Another system of nutrient absorption is the respiratory system. The respiratory system allows for the exchange of gases, oxygen and carbon dioxide. Gas exchange in all situations occurs most effectively through thin, moist membrane. This is why worms need to be kept moist, okay, because they breathe through their skin. Well, of course, we need oxygen for cellular respiration, and carbon dioxide is a byproduct or a waste product from that. And so that gives us an opportunity to bring in the oxygen to the cells and take out the carbon dioxide. In the animal kingdom, there are a number of different kinds of gas exchange mechanisms. Of course, animals like worms depend on their moist skin, and the respiration occurs directly through their skin. Others, like insects, have tracheal tubes. Gills are found in crustaceans and in fishes and amphibians in some stages of their development, and then most of the rest have lungs. The vertebrate organs that are involved in gas exchange, the gills and the lungs, are intimately associated with blood vessels, and the blood vessels actually provide the transport mechanism for the oxygen and the carbon dioxide. Here we have the functional part of the lung. This is a cluster of alveoli. The alveoli are little air sacs that are there at the ends of the bronchioles, and they're surrounded by a capillary bed. The capillaries are very small blood vessels that are the walls of which are only 1 cell thick, and the walls of the alveoli are also about the same thickness. And so it's really easy for oxygen to diffuse out of the air into the bloodstream, and for the carbon dioxide to diffuse out of the blood and into the air sacs. And then so the oxygen breathed in is then carried through your body and the CO2 that you breathe out is provided by the by the oxygen poor blood. Since you've got a higher concentration of oxygen in the air sacs that you breathe in than you do in the blood, then the oxygen easily diffuses into the blood, and the opposite with the carbon dioxide. Another system involved with nutrient absorption, of course, is the circulatory system. The circulatory system is the transport mechanism for these nutrients from both the digestive and the respiratory systems to get throughout the body to the cells. Now remember, as we talked about animals, we talked about a couple of different kinds of circulatory systems. Open circulatory systems, remember, the blood did not remain in vessels all the time, but rather collected in sinuses or cavities and came into direct contact with the body cells. So basically the gas exchange occurred directly from the blood to the cells, and vice versa. In a closed circulatory system like we have, the blood remains in vessels and the gas and nutrient exchange occurs across the vessel walls and the cell membranes. The animals with most of the invertebrates have open circulatory systems except for the annelid worms and the cephalopods, which had closed systems. And in the vertebrates, almost all vertebrates have closed circulatory systems, except for a couple of exceptions in the jawless fishes, the hagfish and the lamprey have an open circulatory system. In vertebrates, we have a couple of different ways that the systems are organized. In fishes, there is a two-chambered heart. Since fishes exchange gases through their gills, then the heart pumps the blood to the gills, where the gas exchange occurs, CO2 for O2. Once the blood is oxygenated, then it travels to the rest of the body, nourishing the cells and picking up the waste materials, then goes back to the heart and is pumped again. This is called a single-loop system with a two-chambered heart. Amphibians and most reptiles have a three-chambered heart. They have two atria, or receiving chambers, and one ventricle, or pumping chamber. Frogs and other amphibians in particular have what we call a pulmocutaneous circuit. That means that it goes not only to the lungs but also to the skin, because they have capillaries in their skin that actually can do gas exchange directly through their skin. So next time you see a frog, you'll know that's why it feels wet on the outside, because it is able to respire through its skin. The oxygen poor blood is pumped from the ventricle to the pulmocutaneous circuit, where it's oxygenated, and then the oxygenated blood goes back to the heart and collects again in that single ventricle, and then is pumped to the rest of the body. Here's the problem, though. There is a mixture of the oxygen-rich and oxygen-poor blood in that ventricle, that single ventricle. So it's not quite as efficient at delivering oxygen to the tissues as it would be if the ventricle were totally separated, like it is in the double loop four-chambered heart system that you find in birds and mammals, and a few reptiles like alligators and crocodiles. Here we have a complete separation of the ventricle into two separate chambers. There's complete separation of the oxygen-poor and oxygen-rich blood. The blood from the body goes to the right side of the heart and is pumped then in the pulmonary circuit to the lungs, where oxygen is exchanged for carbon dioxide, or CO2 is exchanged for oxygen, and then the oxygenated blood goes back through the pulmonary veins to the heart, to the left side of the heart, and then is pumped through the aorta to the rest of the body, where the gas exchange occurs there in the cells. This is a double loop four-chambered heart system.